China has long been known as the most populous nation on Earth, a country with a population of over 1.4 billion people. But in recent years, a troubling trend has been emerging that could reshape the entire future of this colossal country. The birth rate in China has plummeted, and it's happening at an accelerating pace. As shocking as it sounds, China is heading towards zero births, and the consequences could be far-reaching. In fact, this demographic crisis might be the CCP's most pressing challenge today. How did we get here? What's causing this demographic collapse? And, most importantly, what role does the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, play in all of this? We'll explore these questions and more. Stick with me as we dive into one of the most fascinating and concerning issues facing China right now: why China is heading for zero births and the negative impact of the CCP on its people. In 2024, China's birth rate hit a historic low, with fewer than 9 million babies born that year. That's a staggering number when you consider that only a few decades ago, China was the world's fastest-growing nation. The birth rate had already been on a downward trajectory for several years, but this dramatic plunge is raising alarms in Beijing. This rapid decline is setting the stage for a future where China's population could shrink drastically, leading to an aging population that will soon put severe stress on the country's economic and social systems. Now, before we get into the specifics of what's causing this drop, we have to understand one crucial thing. This is not a temporary phenomenon. China's population has been aging for a while now, but what we're seeing now is an acceleration of this trend. The country is not just facing a demographic challenge. It is staring down a crisis that could have irreversible effects on its future. And it's not just happening in a few cities. Across the nation, birth rates are plummeting. Even rural areas, which once had higher birth rates compared to cities, are now experiencing steep declines. This means that even the most traditional parts of China, places once known for their large families, are no longer having the children needed to sustain their population. This decline is the direct result of decades of government interference in family planning. It's important to remember that China's one-child policy wasn't just a government suggestion, it was an enforced rule. For over 35 years, the CCP forced families to limit themselves to just one child. Violators faced harsh penalties, including forced abortions and sterilizations. And, while the policy officially ended in 2015, the damage it caused is still being felt today. The one-child policy didn't just prevent people from having more children. It fundamentally changed the way people think about family. The policy left an entire generation of young adults with an ingrained mindset of small families. Many of those who grew up as only children are now at the age where they would traditionally start having their own children. However, these young adults, raised in an environment where large families were seen as a burden, are far less likely to have multiple children. For those who do decide to have children, the pressure of economic instability, rising living costs, and a lack of social support systems makes it incredibly difficult. The CCP now faces a generational gap in its own population, a gap that the government cannot simply close with more policies and incentives. So, why aren't Chinese people having babies? It's a valid question, especially since the government has rolled out a series of incentives to encourage larger families. Over the past few years, the CCP has offered subsidies, tax breaks, and even free fertility treatments to couples willing to have more children. But despite these efforts, the birth rate continues to fall. Part of the reason lies in the pressures of modern life. Young Chinese people are facing unprecedented financial burdens. The cost of housing, education, and healthcare has skyrocketed in recent years. In major cities like Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou, it's nearly impossible for young people to afford a home, let alone raise a family. This has led to a significant shift in attitudes. Young adults are no longer as willing to sacrifice their personal and professional goals to have children. For many, the prospect of raising a family in an already saturated and expensive society feels like an insurmountable challenge. But it's not just the economy. The Chinese social system, with its high expectations of success, leaves very little room for personal freedom. People are expected to conform to societal norms and constantly work to climb the professional ladder. In a culture where work-life balance is almost non-existent, there's little space for the carefree lifestyle needed to build a family. This pressure to succeed has led many young people to prioritize their careers and personal growth over traditional family structures. And then there's the role of women. Women in China are increasingly educated and economically independent, and many are choosing to focus on their careers instead of having children. The government's policies around women's rights and family support are woefully inadequate. While there are public campaigns pushing for women to have more children, the lack of comprehensive childcare, maternity leave, and work flexibility makes raising a family in China seem like an overwhelming task. What's also troubling is the increasing cultural shift. Young people simply aren't interested in marriage or children. This is a societal issue that cannot be solved by government policies alone. With traditional family structures no longer holding as much appeal, more young people are opting to remain single or childless. As a result, marriages are declining and fewer babies are born. Without weddings, there are no families, and without families, there is no future. In the face of this crisis, the Chinese government has adopted increasingly aggressive measures to encourage birth rates. These policies range from cash bonuses to fertility treatments to direct intervention, such as cold calling women to ask about their pregnancy plans. But instead of empowering individuals, these measures only increase resentment toward the government. For many, it feels like an invasion of privacy, especially for women who already face immense pressure to balance family and career. The government is also revisiting old strategies to boost the rural population. CCP has called for an effort to revitalize rural areas by encouraging young people to return to farming communities. The idea is to bring college graduates to rural China to help with development. But this policy is nothing new. It's a throwback to the Cultural Revolution, when millions of young people were sent to the countryside to learn from the peasants. These measures are less about creating sustainable communities and more about forcing young people into a system that doesn't serve them. In essence, the CCP is trying to manipulate the country's population with a heavy hand. And the result? Many Chinese citizens are increasingly distrustful of the government's motives. Instead of trusting their leaders to provide real solutions, the people of China are finding ways to escape the system altogether. Some are moving abroad in search of better opportunities, while others are choosing to remain childless in a society that feels increasingly suffocating. Another major problem facing China is depopulation in its border regions. In areas like Inner Mongolia, Heilongjiang, and Yunnan, the population is declining rapidly. These regions are critical to China's national security, especially because they border several countries, including Russia, Mongolia, and Southeast Asian nations. But as birth rates fall and young people leave for urban centers, these areas are becoming more and more isolated. The CCP has expressed concern over this issue, especially in regions like Inner Mongolia, where ethnic minorities make up a significant portion of the population. These areas have been suffering from a population drain for years, and with fewer people living along the borders, there are growing fears that China's national security could be compromised. To combat this, the government has rolled out plans to attract more people to these regions. In some areas, the government has even promised financial incentives for families willing to move to the countryside. But the reality is that no one wants to move to a rural area where the prospects of a good job or a stable future are bleak. Even with financial incentives, young people see no future in these outlying regions. The story of China's declining birth rate isn't just about numbers. It's about a society in crisis. A government that once took extreme measures to control population growth is now facing the consequences of its actions. And while the CCP is scrambling to reverse the damage with policies that offer incentives for larger families, the truth is that it may already be too late. China is rapidly heading toward a future where there are no children, and the nation's future is left in the hands of an aging population. As China struggles with its demographic decline, the world will watch closely. The outcomes of this crisis will not only shape China's future, but will have profound effects on global economics, politics, and culture. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into China's demographic crisis, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more insights into the world's most pressing issues.